we're going to have some fun with Windows Remote Desktop, also known as RDP. Windows Remote Desktop is how to remote control another Windows computer as if you're sitting right in front of it. You can even open files on the remote device and print them right to your printer that would be sitting right next to you. Honestly, it's pretty cool. I do want to preface this video in order to save people time by letting you know that the remote computer that you will be connecting to does have to have at least the Pro edition of Windows. If it does not, that is okay. There is a free remote desktop solution that you probably already have access to that you don't know about that I'll show you as well. If you would be so kind, the free solution is tagged at the end of the video. If you do not want to be so kind, it's also in the description. With that said, please like this video, otherwise the YouTube algorithm will think that this is a bad video, in which case people won't get these alternative solutions or the valuable information that we'll be sharing about RDP today. So please help everybody in the community, as well as me, and hit that like button before jumping off. Now, something actually very, very important before we go check what version of Windows we have. This device will need to be in your network. Please never expose RDP directly to the internet. If the device you want to access is on another network across the internet, you have two options. If you're a techie like me, you can go through the adventure of setting up a VPN to connect the two network sites together. If you want something quick and practical, you can use the free alternative I mentioned before. Just want to save you guys time. Thank you for sticking with me. Now to check our version of Windows on either Windows 10 or Windows 11, we'll go ahead and go to our search bar and type About. You should see an option that says About Your PC. We'll click this option. Once in here, the second section down is Windows Specifications, and the first entry will be the edition of Windows that you have. If you just see Windows 10 or Windows 10 Home, you do not have the Pro Edition or above, in which case, again, please go use that free alternative. Now in here as well, we will also see the computer name, which will be required in order to access the device. However, this will be available on a later screen as well. Now that we know we have the correct edition of Windows, we need to enable RDP. And to do this, we will go to our search bar again, and we will type Remote Desktop Settings. We will click Remote Desktop Settings, and then we will flip the enable switch from off to on and confirm. If your device is managed by an organization, you may not be able to enable RDP. If you are an IT administrator, you'll want to go check group policy and ensure that your users are in the correct security groups if necessary. You may see a message that you need to sign in as an administrator. If so, you'll need to log out and log into the admin account in order to turn this on. If you're not sure who the admin is, let's try to run something as an admin and see whose name pops up. We'll go to the search bar. We'll type CMD. That's for command prompt. Then we will click Run as Administrator. If you see a name with a password, that's the person who's going to be the admin. If there's any other admins on the device, then you'll see an option for more choices below the password field. If you click Run as Administrator and it just has yes or no, congratulations, you are the admin. If it does not say just yes or no and there is no name, but it wants you to type a username in, then you are most likely on a device that is managed by an organization, in which case you're going to need help from your IT department in order to deploy remote access services to your device, aka RDP. Congratulations. Now that it's on, we'll be given the computer name, which we will need for connecting to the device. By default, only admin accounts will be able to connect. If you would like to add other users, you'll have to add them here below. Whatever user account you're going to choose to log in, you will have their desktop and files as if you were logged in as them at the computer in question. So we will go ahead and add an account. We click Add, and then we can start typing in the name of the user that we want to add. If you get this screen, you typed it incorrectly. If that is the case, we'll go to our search bar. We'll type in PowerShell. Don't be intimidated, this is really easy. I'm here to help guide you through it. We're just going to type git -local user, and this will list every user on the computer. Now, if you don't see your account here, that means your device is most likely managed by an organization or that you have an IT department, in which case it may not be considered a local user account because IT departments usually manage user accounts on the network instead of locally to your device. Now, I'm going to save you guys so much frustration. Next thing we need to think about before we walk away from the computer is that if it powers off, we'll no longer be able to connect. There's nothing more frustrating than setting up a device to be accessed remotely, just to have to walk to it in order to physically turn it back on. We will tell this device to never shut off by going to the power settings, and we can do this by going to our search bar and typing power cfg.cpl. This is just a shortcut so that we don't have to go through a bunch of menu options in order to get there. Now that we're here, we'll either click choose when the computer sleeps or choose when to turn off display. They should both take us to the same menu. We aren't as worried about the screen shutting off as we are concerned about the computer going into sleep mode. We can set this to never. Now we can start the fun stuff. If we go to another computer in our network, we can type RDP and choose Remote Desktop Connection. Here we'll type the name of the computer we will be connecting to. We can connect right away if we want to, but there's some menu options in here, and I think that's where things start getting pretty good. Before we get too far into the menu options, if the name here, if you click connect and it doesn't work, and you get this error menu with the red X, we will make sure we got the name of the device right, make sure the device is on, and make sure the computer is on the same network. If all of these items are correct, and you have verified that they are correct, then we'll need to make changes on your router and or connect using just the IP address of the device. I'm not going to get too far down that rabbit hole because that's not what people are here for. I recommend just going the practical route. Again, free alternative. And if you do want me to go down the rabbit hole, I'll link videos here when I drop them. To scratch the surface, your router usually keeps a list of the names of devices and the IP addresses, which is basically like a home address where they're located. And in your standard network, these IP addresses are always changing, but the name always stays the same. So instead of having to stay up to date with your address that changes all the time, all you'll ever have to remember is the name, and there's services that do this for you. So if there's something wrong there, we'll want to fix this service, which is called DNS, and is most likely on your router, or we'll want to just use the IP address. The act of handing out these IP addresses is another fancy acronym, and is also generally handled by your router. This is called DHCP and could also be the issue because DHCP often tells the devices where to look for DNS, which is going to resolve that host name to that IP. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's for the people who might need to go down the rabbit hole, but please pump the brakes. As somebody who's done a lot of IT support, I can say that I've practically never had to mess with these services. It's always been something like a number missing in the name of the device not being connected to the Wi-Fi or the network, or something random along those lines. If fixing the services on the router doesn't help, solution 2 would be setting a static IP address. I will link a video in the description or above. And to note, the red error with the X will probably be the only one that will pertain to the previously stated items. Now, on the other hand, if you don't get a red X, you may get a certificate warning, which is totally fine. Or you may see a message that you're not allowed to log in via a remote connection. And we'll go over that as well after we're done going over all of these powerful RDP settings. We can click Show Options to get to the settings menu. We have a Save As option, which allows you to save this connection to your desktop along with all the settings that are related to it. And after any update we make, all we have to do is click Save, or we can click Save As to create a new one if we have multiple machines we'll be remoting to. To help with convenience, we can also click Allow Me to Save Credentials in order to never have to type your password again. Just keep in mind, if you remove your password as an obstacle to this remote connection, someone only needs to be in front of your computer, and they'll have access to everything on your device. Any successful connections you make will be stored here under where it says computer, along with the names of any devices you connected to being saved here. Your credentials will actually be saved with those connections. So as you change the connections, the saved username and or password will change as well. We will try to quickly run through all these options because you've been hanging in with me for a while. Highly appreciate you. If we go to display, we have small to large. Large means that every time it launches, it will launch in full screen. Anything smaller will not be full screen when it launches. This, of course, can be changed after the session is open. However, it will be how it defaults. We can check the box to use all monitors for the remote session. The issue with this item is that it is all or nothing. If you have 3 monitors, you want to use 2 for the remote session, and you want to use 1 for your own desktop on the computer you're sitting at physically, that's not going to work. The remote session will take up all 3 screens. Otherwise, you'll have to make it not full screen. You have to try and drag the window to adjust the size right. It's just not perfect. Technically, you can open the RDP file in a text editor and input the correct info into that RDP file to change this functionality, but that is a bit advanced for the scope of this video. If that's something you're interested in, it'll either be in the description again, or you can look it up on someone else's channel, and there's plenty of people showing you how to do that. For colors, we have a drop down where we can choose a lower bit depth. I assume that this is in order to improve performance when there's not enough bandwidth to provide a good remote connection. However, I could be wrong. We have an option for display the connection bar when I use full screen. If you uncheck this box, you might find yourself stuck. The connection bar is going to be a blue bar at the top of the remote session. And with this unchecked, in order to get that to appear, you'll have to click Control, Alt, and Home all at the same time. We have audio settings here. If we turn these on and jump into our session, we'll see input and output devices named remote audio. These were not here before, however, they were actually made by the remote session when we connected, which is pretty sick. Printers are shared by default, so we'll check this out. Any printers that say redirected were not here until our remote session. These are actually printers local to us rather than printers at the remote device. Keyboard adjusts what machine you want to use hotkeys for in your remote session. Keys like Control-Alt-Delete will still pull up information on your computer. However, hotkeys like Control-Shift-Escape will pull up items on the remote computer. If I'm not mistaken, Control-Alt-Delete I think is the only exception. Please correct me if I'm wrong. We also have Clipboard, which is pretty cool because it allows us to actually copy and paste from one device to the other. If we hit More, we have Ports. This is a little more advanced and is actually referring to serial ports or COM ports. It's good for things like signature pads and other specialty items like that. Location will actually allow the remote device to use your location. So if we did connect across the internet and I'm say in Chicago, but the device is over in Nevada, then while I'm using that device, it'll show my Chicago location, give me recommendations based off that location, weather, etc., etc. Now this next one's so simple, but so wild. This is pretty cool. We have drives, and if we expand this, we can actually choose particular drives that we may or may not want to use on our computer and share those to this device, meaning we can access a whole slew of files and items on the remote device that we're actually sharing from ours. Just remember that any resources you give this remote computer does increase the attack surface for malicious actors to compromise your device. Don't share these if it's not your computer, and even if it is, it's good practice to only share what you need. Here we can use our remote device's webcam. We'll open the camera app. Look, it even says integrated device. So sick. Other supported plug-and-play devices is kind of interesting. Plug-and-play devices would be things like printers, webcams, USB drives, etc. So this option is really just a catch-all for anything that wasn't covered in the above options. Be aware that not every device is redirectable, which is just the term for using these devices over the remote connection. Now, if you noticed, I did skip two of these. Smart Card or Windows Hello redirection allows users to authenticate securely using their physical smart cards, or Windows Hello, even in a remote session. Windows Hello is a feature from Windows to replace passwords with biometrics, PIN codes, facial recognition, and basically just move you to passwordless authentication. Now, the item listed here is Hello for Business, which is an extension of the standard Windows Hello and includes more fun stuff for security. From my understanding, this can be used to authenticate the remote session itself, as well as applications once the session has been established. I don't know the nuances because I've never used this service. WebAuthn here is a standard that encapsulates Windows Hello. What would happen if one of these was on and the other was off? I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you do. Are you still hanging with me? We're almost there. You're doing great. On the other hand, if you're slowing down like your RDP connection, you can optimize it by changing the settings in this drop-down to slower network settings. Now, these options should auto-negotiate, but you can definitely change them and see what happens if you're having problems. Persistent bitmap caching. is images from the remote computer, like desktop icons and things like that, that actually get stored on your computer in order to speed up the connection time, because you don't have to transmit the data if you already have it. You shouldn't need to turn this off. The disk space used is quite minimal, and the option below here is pretty self-explanatory. There is a remote desktop client application in the Microsoft Store that is supposedly better at handling session reconnects than our remote desktop connection software is here. However, besides this difference, the Microsoft Store application is really just a graphical user interface overhaul, maybe with a few less menu options. You can get this from the Microsoft Store by first searching for the Microsoft Store in your search bar, and once opening it, searching for the remote desktop client in the store. Click it and make sure it says that it's from the Microsoft Corporation, and then click Get. This is the last tab, and then we'll go over the last error you could run into, and we'll actually run a new remote desktop session. This operation here in Advanced manages warnings that you'll see during consecutive connections or when you first connect to a device. Here we have settings for a remote desktop gateway. A gateway is a single point that bridges two networks together, such as your home network to the internet or your internet to your home network. And this is generally done by your router, which is considered a gateway. The remote desktop gateway is a device we can put on a network that handles these RDP sessions between that network and another one that you will be doing these connections from or to. This and its settings are advanced enough that I don't think they warrant an explanation in this video. They should have their own video instead. This last button relates to intra-ID accounts, or accounts such as Outlook.com, Live, or anything else that's under the Microsoft umbrella. I've never worked with a system that implemented this, so I'm unsure of when it would be advantageous to use it or the implications of doing so. Now that we made it through the ringer, let's save this puppy and click Connect. This is the warning that we talked about in the advanced settings. Yes, we know what device we are connecting to, and we will check the box for this to not bother us again. This next warning is regarding something called a certificate, which is beyond the scope of this video. If I ever make a video on certificates, I'll tag it here or put it in the description below. For now, we can just click Don't Show Again and click that it's safe to connect. This is the last and final error. Hopefully you're going to get a lot of value out of this, and you'll see why momentarily. If you see this error, you most likely didn't add the account you're trying to use via the remote desktop settings that we turned on the remote computer. I may or may not have explained, but adding an account in that location adds the account to something called the remote desktop users group. And if we see this error here, we can read, by default, members of the remote user group have this right. But there's a place that might bring some value that could be the issue instead. If you verified that your account is in the remote desktop setting on the remote device in question, and you still get this error, we have something overriding these defaults, so let's talk about it. If you're part of an organization or your computer is managed by an IT department, there's most likely a policy in place that you don't have access to changing and is probably what's blocking you. However, if your device is not managed, this is a policy that we can change, and not only change, but use to your advantage. If you log in as admin and search GP Edit, we'll click Edit Group Policy to launch the local group policy editor. Now, I wouldn't play here too much unless the computer is solely yours and you are interested in tinkering. So for this, we'll want to go to Computer Configuration, Windows Setting, Security Settings, Local Policies, User Rights Assignment, and if we click on that folder, we'll get a list of items, and the one we're looking for in particular is Deny Logon through Remote Desktop Services. If we double click this, and there's any entries in here, in order to give yourself access, you'll want to remove these. By default, there's none here. However, if there's anybody you want to block from remotely accessing your computer via their user profile for any reason, you can add them here, and they will no longer be able to remote to the device, even if they're an admin. So we'll go ahead and remove this entry that I put in here and apply. So now if we attempt to connect again, put in the password, and voila, we're now in. Cool thing is if we take a look at the other console for the other computer, this is what it looks like. There's a whole session logged in going on in the background that we can't see. Something very important to note is that only one session can be going at a time. If you watch me try and log in, you can see it states that another user is signed in, which is our session going on in the background. And if I click yes, I want to sign in anyways, and we switch back to our other device that we are remoting from, we'll see we get this warning here, remote desktop connection. Do you want to allow admin guy to connect to this machine? We can click OK or cancel, but in this instance, I'm going to click OK. If you want to overcome this limitation, this can be done with servers that are built for multiple sessions, such as terminal servers, VNC servers, and others. However, this again is beyond the scope of this video. Thanks for watching.